This summer, Ontario's Ombudsman released a report probing what went wrong last fall with the school bus system for the Toronto and Toronto Catholic District School Boards. Now that students are back, we are pleased to welcome him to our studio to check in on how that's all going so far this school year and to give us some insight into how he decides what to investigate. Ontario's Ombudsman is Paul Dubé, and we welcome Monsieur Dubé to our studio. Nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure, Steve.
So you've had the job for about a year and a half now, and I guess the bus fiasco was the biggest report that you've done so far, got the most attention anyway. Remind us what you found when you looked into this issue.
Well, what we found was that there were some indications, some red flags early on last year that there were going to be some problems. Probably as early as July, there were some red flags. And what happened was when the transportation group knew that there were potential shortages, they didn't communicate that to the school board. And then later on, when it was pretty obvious to the school board in August that there were going to be some shortages, they did not communicate that to the parents. And really, there was no effective communication to parents about what was going on until the crisis actually occurred in September.
And remind us what happened in some cases.
So there were several routes that had no drivers assigned to them, and so about 2,600 kids didn't have a way to school and back. Caused tremendous disruption for families.
Was that day one only?
No, it lasted for several weeks, a few months actually, well into the school year, and we had some really severe cases of, one woman lost her job because she had to spend time driving her child to and from work. So severe disruptions to families, very stressful for the kids. And of course, some of these kids have special needs, and it's very, very traumatic for them to be left on school buses or have rides of 3 and 4 hours on the school bus. Some of them are dropped off at the wrong place. There's a Purple Equals Parent program where some of these special needs kids are supposed to have parent-to-parent or adult-to-adult service delivery, and that wasn't done. And so, of course, replacement drivers were called into service, and in some cases, taxi drivers were pressed into service on some of these routes. And of course, they were not adequately trained on the safety protocols, and this is where we had some of these lapses in security, lapses in safety.
Well, you made, I think, about a couple of dozen recommendations on all of that, and how are things now as a result of the recommendations you've made?
So we're quite encouraged, actually. I made 42 recommendations, really directing the school boards to do their assessments earlier on in the year, enhance communication, put procedures in place. They'll have GPS trackings on all the buses now, and there'll be real-time updates on where buses are so that any potential delays will be communicated to parents in advance. And what we've seen so far this year is that they've taken those to heart, and there has been some proactive communication.
Well, you say taking them to heart, and I hold in my hand here. I mean, this is, admittedly, we're in the first week of the school year, but look at this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is 10, 12 pages here of the list of schools and the delays, some of which go into 40 and 50 minutes, 60 and 70 minutes. Is it really better?
Sure, because those are delays. Those aren't shortages. Those are not routes that have gone unserviced. And I think that a certain amount of delays are typical every year. We'll see how this year compares to last, but what I've been thinking is that while there may be some fingers crossed at the beginning of this school year, there are no heads in the sand this year.
So people know at least.
People know at least, and we've really been encouraged by the response of the school boards. The Toronto District Board and the Catholic Board, they've taken this to heart. They've been serious. Look, nobody wants this repeated. Nobody wants another crisis this year, so they've done their best to alleviate that situation.
Okay. I know you're the 7th Ombudsman?
Correct.
So this position has been around for a while, but I don't want to assume that everybody knows what your job is. So tell us, what's your mission?
Well, my mission is to make Ontario a better place to live, frankly. We have a passionate team that are dedicated to doing just that. So essentially, we oversee the public sector in Ontario. And for 40 years, the office has been around, and we had jurisdiction over the provincial government, the administrative side of the provincial government. But 2 years ago, that jurisdiction was expanded, and in fact, it was doubled to go from roughly 500 public sector bodies to almost 1,000. With the inclusion of Ontario's 444 municipalities, the school boards, and the universities.
Did you get hospitals? You didn't get
hospitals have gone to the new patient ombudsman.
Oh yes, that's right. Right.
So, so it's an exciting time to be the Ombudsman of Ontario, and I think the office, you noted, it's been around for a while, 40 years now. But we're as effective and as prolific as ever, and in the 17 months that I've been here, we've put out 5 special reports, 171 recommendations. They've all been accepted, 2 annual reports. And so we're really working hard to make a difference for Ontarians.
Let me just understand how you work as well. Can you investigate whatever you'd want, or do you have to respond to a complaint from the public?
Generally speaking, we're complaints driven, but I have the power to do own motion investigations. So if we see something that, we feel warrants attention and it's feasible to do a systemic investigation or an individual investigation, we'll do that. And I think that's the beauty of the legislation is we have one of the most vigorous and effective oversight regimes, I think, in Canada.
You know, I don't know too many kids who grow up saying, you know, when I grow up, I want to be the ombudsman. I mean, it's not one of those, necessarily those kind of jobs. So what's in your background that leads you to this?
So I'm a lawyer by training. I call myself a recovering lawyer because while I enjoyed what I did, and that was very rewarding, helping one person at a time. And I didn't know a lot about the ombudsman world either until I was appointed taxpayers ombudsman in 2008. And what I found was rather than the adversarial life of a lawyer, this is more about consensus building. This is about finding solutions. I like to say the main objective of my job is not naming, blaming, and shaming people, it's finding solutions. So really the 2 key factors to my job are relationship building and communications. What I try to do when we approach a public sector body that's been complained about is encourage them to embrace complaints. It's the best source of feedback. And show them that there is something in it for them. I look for win-win-win situations whenever possible. And quite often when a public sector body is complained about, we don't find issues that they don't already know about. Right? Most public servants, they want to do a good job, they want to do the right thing, but sometimes they're constrained by rules and the bureaucracy. So the value that we add as a third-party independent body coming in to investigate these things is we shine a light on those situations. And quite often, management or the leadership in these public sector bodies wants to fix a problem, but they can't get, there's not the political will or they lack the resources. And as I like to say, the squeaky wheel doesn't always get the grease, but most often the wheel with the spotlight on it does. And what happens is when we come along, we do a report, we publicize it widely, miraculously the political will and the resources appear. And that's a win-win-win situation.
I'm not going to ask you to comment on your predecessor, but you had a predecessor, Andre Marin, who was very good at the naming and shaming and blaming and getting big headlines for the Ombudsman's office. He got into some trouble too over it as well. But I do think I need to ask you why you think your approach pays bigger dividends than his approach.
Well, look, everybody's got their own style, everybody's got their own approach. People are different. He built a great team, of which I am the beneficiary, and did a lot of good work. And I'm following in those footsteps and trying to keep up the good work. And what I would say is that, as I said earlier, the office is as effective and as prolific as ever. We're building inroads with new stakeholders in the area of municipalities, universities, and school boards. And so I think that we're on a good footing. And the office is bigger than one person, and it's even bigger than the Ombudsman. It takes a team to do this. Not one person cannot accomplish what we accomplish.
How many got people working for you?
We've got about 110. We're aiming for 144. So we're in full recruitment mode, and that's an ongoing process. But really, I just feel blessed to lead such a passionate, intelligent, dedicated team.
Some of I think I remember that the Ombudsman could look into complaints against, for example, the company that distributes electricity to homes and businesses across the province, HydroOne. But now that it's been semi-privatized, you can't do that anymore. Is that right?
That's right. There is a dedicated ombudsman for HydroOne. I don't know if there's anybody in place right now, but that is the situation now.
Do you regret the fact that you no longer have oversight of that? Because you were looking into people who
I think it's unfortunate. I think that anything that is even partially owned by the province should be within our jurisdiction. I think that Ontarians deserve that ultimate oversight of an officer of the legislature, and that would be the optimal situation.
I mean, in some of these cases, you got people paying $1,300 a month for a hydro bill where they were normally paying $30 or something, and they were dramatically overcharged. Then again, you've got the school bus issue, which is sort of massive and affects thousands and thousands of people. So, I presume at the end of the day, you're the guy who has to decide, yes, we're going to go after this. No, we haven't got the people power to go after this. How do you make that call?
Yeah. Well, one of the tests I employ, it comes from evidence, it comes from a lot of things, but one of the first questions I ask is this big enough to matter but small enough to win? Is there something where we can add value? I mean, we're not going to cure homelessness, we're not going to fix poverty, so we have to aim our sights on areas where we can add value. And I think we've been pretty successful at that, and it's the methodology that we employ when you compile irrefutable evidence and you have a fair and balanced investigation process, you know, we walk the talk of procedural fairness. We give public sector bodies lots of opportunity for input. Then we make feasible recommendations, and we give these bodies opportunities to have input on the final recommendations before they ever go public. And then we publicize widely. So when you do that, you make it really hard for a reasonable public sector body to not accept your recommendations.
I don't have to tell you that we are living in times where institutions of the city, the province, the country, you know, go broader if you want, are very much in the crosshairs. There are many citizens who have lost faith in the institutions that have been developed over the last several decades. I imagine you get your share of letters from people who say, I counted on you to get me justice, you haven't done it, now I don't believe in you anymore either. How do you handle those cases?
So you're absolutely right, and this is one of the things I say is that if people, it comes down to human nature, and I observed this a long time ago. If people think an institution is going to be unfair or not treat them fairly, they're not really going to fully engage with that organization, and they're not going to accept its decisions. And I saw that at the Canada Revenue Agency, which, you know, depends on voluntary compliance. And so this is part of my messaging, is that you know, there's something in it for you. If you enhance that appearance of fairness, it's actually good for your bottom line. Because when people don't engage or accept your decisions, you've got to deal with appeals, litigation, underground economy, bad PR. So really, I try and encourage public sector bodies to embrace complaints and respond to them effectively and enhance their transparency, enhance their fairness, and that'll enhance the bottom line. With respect to my organization, it's true, we can't be everything to everybody. And
like what percentage of complaints could you go on, and what would you just simply not have the people power to handle?
Well, I think we have the people power to tackle the urgent issues in Ontario, but you know, there are some issues. People want us to do things that we weren't set up to do, and go places that really we're not entitled to because of our jurisdiction.
Can you give an example? Well, hospitals you can't go after. We have Christine Elliott now.
Professional, self-regulated professions like lawyers and doctors, that type of thing. I mean, you know, we play the cards that we're dealt, but I think that in the meantime, we strive to add value where we can.
Can I, this is a little cheeky, but we had a discussion earlier in the program where we had a couple of people commenting on the fact that there are, so I'm just going to throw you an example that we just got. Yeah. A lot of schools that live in well-to-do neighborhoods are able to raise a lot more money through their parental involvement than obviously schools that are in lower income neighborhoods. And the result, these experts were arguing, is an education system where we're starting to see bigger inequality. You know, the schools in the better neighborhoods are able to buy the computers and all the other great stuff for the schools that others cannot. If somebody from one of those schools that, you know, where they're not raising a ton of money at the bake sales came to you and said, this is exacerbating educational inequality in the province, please investigate, would you take that on?
I'd consider it. You know, we don't typically get involved in decisions of policy, but where it comes to fairness and administrative fairness, we do. So it depends on the fact scenario, but we could probably consider that.
What's the biggest wrong you've righted so far, in your view?
The biggest wrong I've righted? I think that one of the sets of recommendations that has the most potential to save lives are the recommendations that we made with respect to police training on de-escalation and how to deal with people in crisis. And I think that that has great potential to actually save lives. And you know, if there's one theme that I see running through all the areas of our jurisdiction right now, it's the prevalence of mental health, people with mental health issues in our society, and the lack of support and resources for them. And so police have to deal with that, we have to deal with it, the schools have to deal with it, and so that's a big issue. And so, you know, applying my test, can we cure mental health in Ontario or in Canada? Probably not, but in each of those areas of jurisdiction, there is usually a recommendation aimed at dealing with the mental health aspect of that investigation.
Gotcha. Ombudsman, it took us a year and a half to get you in here, but we're glad we finally did.
The pleasure is mine.
Thank you very much for coming on TVO tonight and telling us a little bit more about what you do. That's Paul Dubé, the 7th Ombudsman for the province of Ontario.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.